Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Nelson.
Thanks for being here this early morning for this very important endeavor.
Good morning. Welcome to your town hall meeting, and we're excited to be here with you this morning.
My name is Nelson Leonard. I'm the president of the Austin NAACP, and once again, we're very proud to be here this morning as we undertake this tremendous effort and conversation. And of course, we want you to join us and be a part of it. Cavino.
Yes, my name is Gavino Fernandez, and I am the LULAC District 12 Director. And like my colleague Nelson Linder mentioned, we're proud to be here. We're proud to be part of this endeavor, this new effort to convey to you, to the community. And we want to make sure that in order for this effort to succeed, you will be the owners of this whole process, and that's why we're here. We're glad that you're here with us today.
Regarding single-sex schools, I want to share an opinion by the president of the National Association for Single-Sex Public Education. I think he's considered an expert. I want to make sure I quote an expert. This is Dr. Leonard Sykes, and here's what he has to say. He says the single-sex format creates opportunities that don't exist in co-ed classrooms. Teachers can employ strategies in the all-girls classroom and the all-boys classroom which don't work well in co-ed classroom. What have they learned? They've learned that if you train your teachers properly, prepare properly, get community involvement, get folks on the same page, these schools have a much greater chance of success. When you look at the examples given for success, it's very clear that those schools have done that. And let me say, as far as Austin, I see the same process. You're getting community feedback, you're getting organizations involved. Of course, the training comes later, but I think clearly there's a path to success. And let me say, I'm proud to be a part of it, and as long as we follow the format for successful schools, I have no doubt that we can engage our young people and make sure that they are academically successful.
Again, I just want to share with you a little bit of my personal background. I am an Austin native. I was born and raised in Austin. I'm an AISD product, and I began my school in Ortega, around the Givens area. I then went on to parochial school at Santa Julia, and then went on to Zavala, Allen Martin, and then eventually graduated from Johnston High School. And through that whole experience, one of the things that I have noticed is that many challenges that existed in that era continue to exist today in our communities. And therefore, I feel, and I have seen and have received feedback on this new proposal, that this is a process, a proposal that could be a prescription to address many of those issues. One of the many issues that confronted us in those days and continues to confront us today is the issue of dropout, the issue of non-attendance. Every day one of our children does not attend school, we lose $45. And if you multiply that on a daily basis throughout the district, that ends up being a substantial amount of money. So with this type of approach of an all-boys and all-girls school, we believe and we've seen that they have had success in other parts, not only of the United States, but in other parts of the country. I understand that this particular geographic district is a multicultural district, students. And we are here and we want to be able to provide as many resources and support in order for this new endeavor to be successful in our communities, because we need to make sure that we prepare our young students for the workforce of tomorrow. And the workforce of tomorrow is no longer local, now it's international. We have bright students, we have intelligent students in our district. All we need is to ante up the support to the parents, to the schools, to the administrators, because it takes all of those components in order to have a successful academic community. So with that, I will state with the famous words of the late Dr. Barbara Jordan, who used to teach at LBJ Public Schools. She would tell her students, once you have garnered all your research, done all your surveys, calculated all your results, before you complete your project, now you go into the community and receive the raw input and see how that matches with what you have accumulated. And in then those same steps of leadership, it is an honor for me to introduce to you your AISD District 1 trustee, the Honorable Cheryl Bradley.
Thank you so much for being here. Today is a very important day. We're going to discuss single gender schools, single gender education. When I first thought about this, I had attended a parent summit that was held by our parent support specialist, and it was held at Sheraton. It was about a couple of years ago. And they showed discipline data, and it reflected two vertical teams, LBJ and Reagan. And I constantly say this, and when I saw it, I would have thought, well, I was actually floored when I saw the information. Elementary school data showed about 157, right under 200 discipline referrals. Middle school was over 700, right under 800 discipline referrals. When we got to high school, it dropped back down to 200. And that was startling to me because it basically said we definitely need to focus on middle school. And the idea that popped into my mind at that time, whether it's a good idea, people think it's a bad idea, it was to separate out boys and girls. And it's not to separate it just to separate it, because we know penal institutions are separated by gender. And we know that's not a positive impact on anybody. But to separate it so that we can remove some of those distractors. I also know at middle school, you're given a certain amount of independence. When you're coming from elementary, you're in a self-contained classroom. Everything you do every day is pretty much with the same children with one teacher. When you get to middle school, you are moving from classroom to classroom. You have a certain amount of independence. And sometimes that's when those behaviors start to manifest themselves. And what came to my mind is how can we remove those distractors so that when kids come into school, they're coming into school for one purpose, and that is education. I'm a firm believer in educating the whole child, and the superintendent will tell you that. I'm constantly saying there has to be a holistic approach to education, that there has to be fine arts as well as athletics, that we have to help our children develop those talents, those God-given talents. Sometimes our children can go from elementary to high school and have never touched on what that talent could be. And I don't want to see that anymore. And I believe that sometimes when that happens, our children get caught up into other things because they honestly do not see just how wonderful they can honestly be. And I believe that we have a responsibility to help develop that. And I know that with state accountability, it's hard in a classroom these days because there's things that our teachers have to live up to and things that they have to do because the state has mandated those responsibilities. And sometimes our children may not see a fine arts classroom, and they may not get on the field. They may never pick up a crayon. They may never be able to touch on those things that help develop their talent. They may never know that they have the skill set to be a debater in speech. They may never know that. But I honestly believe that if we can just kind of separate out the sexes, let boys be boys, because we tend to take our boys and we sit them in a chair and we expect them to be robots. But just let them be boys, because they like to move. And I know you have to have some constraints, but actually develop and design a curriculum that's focusing on them. Same way with our girls, design and develop a curriculum that's focusing on them. Science, technology, engineering, math. There's a whole world of things that's out there for our children. but we have to ensure that they are exposed to it. And some of our children do not get that exposure. And I'm hoping that this is one of the avenues that we can do that. And that's why we're here today, to have that discussion. Thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you, Trustee Bradley. At this time, I'm going to introduce facilitator for today's program. But I want to say this before I make the introduction. He has been a leader in our community for the past 20-plus years in the fight for education empowerment. He has been consistent and devoted in this effort and has inspired and taught many of us about the principles of the struggle. Join me in welcoming Senior Pastor Bishop Sterling Lance of Lady Calvary Baptist Church.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. It is good to be in a setting where we are talking about things that are important. It's terrible to waste a Saturday talking about things that have no relevancy. Yes, I am the senior pastor of the Greater Calvary Bible Church, and I serve as the presiding bishop of the Family Life International Fellowship. So thank you for the introduction. Before we begin, I want you to think for a moment. Just perhaps close your eyes and think about how you want to be treated today. Just take a moment, just close your eyes. Think about it. How you want to be treated today. I see about 3 or 4 people who have your eyes closed. Unless you have an ailment, close those eyes. All right, open. Now you can open your eyes, but don't lose that thought. Our purpose today is threefold. 1, we want to inform you about single-sex schools. 2, we want to educate you on the research that has been conducted. And 3, we want to engage you in a dialogue. During our time together, I ask that you keep an open mind, listen to and try to respect all points of view, suspend judgment as best you can. Remain curious, seek to understand what is not clear, question all assumptions, and look for new insights. Maintain brevity. Let's make that with a capital B. Go for honesty and depth, but please allow time for other people. This time I'd like to introduce 2 students who will share their perspectives on single-sex schools. Ms. Lillian Pellette. Am I pronouncing that correct? Pellette. Ms. Lillian Pellette and Mr. Oscar Garcia. Come forward, please. Ms. Pellette attends, and also Autumn Martinez. Are you here? Come up, Autumn. They both attend the Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders, and Mr. Oscar Garcia attended Webb Middle School and has participated in single-sex classroom for a minute. He plans to go to Reagan High School. My first question is for Lillian and Autumn. Why did you decide to attend the Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders? Ladies.
My name is Autumn. I'm 17. I'm a senior at Ann Richards. I chose to attend the Ann Richards School. Originally, honestly, my mom kind of was like, you're going to go to that school. That was back in 7th grade when the school first opened. But over the years, the past 5 years, I've realized that my life has been incredible things have happened to me since going to the school. Like I've earned AP credit from various AP classes that I've taken because of the dedication of the teachers, and I've just gained a lot of social and academic achievements and just various reasons, but those are the main ones, and I've gained many great friendships from the school as well. So that's why that's why I'm still here.
Hi, my name is Lillian Pellette. I'm also 17, and I am a senior at Ann Richards. My dad's over there. Wait, hi. I, like Autumn, did not choose specifically to go to Ann Richards, but that does not change the fact that I have learned so much from my teachers, from my principal, from all of my friends, well, my sisters, as we like to call each other. We have grown very, very close, and I have received so many opportunities from going to Ann Richards, for example, I would have never discovered that I loved to dance as much as I did. And I feel that so many people have such a guarded view of my school, but when I feel that when they see me and when they see Autumn and when they see my other sisters, that their eyes open up and they see that this was easily the easiest and best choice for me specifically. And I've gained so much from my school, and I feel that I will be able to carry all that I've gained throughout my life. So that's why I am still at the Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders.
Thank you very much, ladies. Oscar, come forward. What have you noticed about learning in an all-boys versus co-ed classroom?
Well, first would be that us guys, we had less distractions, and and also our GPAs for most of those guys, it went like really high. For example, me, I graduated middle school with a 4.34 GPA. And also, like the teachers, they didn't really teach how they usually teach with co-ed class. It was more like free. Us, the guys, we acted like ourselves. We weren't like different. We had our own personality.
Thank you very much, Oscar. Is there anything else that either of you would like to share with our community regarding your experiences?
I would.
Please.
So I know that there are plenty of people in the community and even like in the world in general that have, like Lillian said, a guarded view of single-sex education. But like I've said before, over the past 5 years and just being at the school for so long, I've learned that it really does not matter, like, if you go to school with all girls or all boys. I mean, like, just the negative perception that people have on that it's just kind of like, to me, it's really just kind of ridiculous, like, just to say the least. I mean, being at an all-girls school, I've been able to focus so much more, and I know it sounds so like cliche and stuff, but I've been able to focus so much better as opposed to the way I was like in 6th grade at a co-ed school. And just like the environment that I'm in, like at Ann Richards, I could only speak for my school, but I mean, I'm surrounded by girls that have the same goals as I do, to go to college, not only go to college, but like graduate from it, and to really just stay focused and have goals and to reach them. And just the environment that I'm in with all girls, and just it's a positive environment, and I'm really thankful for that too. And I think single sex why do I keep messing up on that word? That it's a really good environment to learn and to grow in. That's what I have to say.
Going off of what Autumn was saying, Ann Richards has taught me that it's okay to dream big. For example, when I graduate from high school, I want to go to the American University of Paris in France and get a major in musical theater with a minor in production. And my school has told me that that's okay. You can go to Paris. You can be whatever you want to be. You can be the next star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, or you can be the next teacher that helps the next student get to where they need to be. And I really, really appreciate that my principal and my father have backed me up and created this foundation that I can do whatever I want. And my sisters can do that as well. And single-sex education was easily one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. You may be seated. Our panelists today are Austin-based educators, researchers, and community leaders. To my immediate left is Ms. Carol Chapman, who's principal at the J. Frank Dobie College Prep. She's been a public school administrator for 21 years. Next to her is Ray Garcia. He's a principal at the Webb Middle School. He was the administrator responsible for the implementation of single-sex classrooms 3 years ago at Webb. Next to him is Ms. Jian Goka. She's the principal at the Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders. She began her 30-year career in education at Cullen Junior High in Houston Independent School District. Next to Ms. Goka is Dr. Edmund T. Gordon. He is the current chair of the African and African Diaspora Studies Department at the University of Texas. Most recently, Dr. Gordon served as the Associate Vice President of Thematic Initiatives and Community Engagement of the Division of Diversity and Community Engagement. Next to him is Mr. Wilton Harris. He's a coordinator for XY Zone, a male involvement empowering teenage boys and offering job readiness services, support groups, mentors, and community service projects. Mr. Harris is passionate about inspiring young men to set their sights on pursuing higher education. Next to Mr. Harris, he's already actually been introduced by someone who's much better qualified to introduce him, his daughter, but Mr. Robert Pellet. And he is the proud father of Lillian, who you just heard. He serves as he has served as the 2011-2012 president of the Parent Teachers Student Association for Ann Richards. Next to Mr. Pellet is Dr. Victor B. Sines. He's the 5th-year assistant professor in the Department of Educational Administration at the University of Texas at Austin. His current research on Latino males in higher education examines the experiences of Latino males at both 2-year and 4-year institutions as they navigate their college pathways. Next to Dr. Sines is Mr. Jonathan Winship. He's a 2nd-year teacher at Webb Middle School. Mr. Winship has taught both co-ed and single-sex classes for 7th and 8th graders at Webb. So to start the discussion, let me ask a question. I guess this is sort of like an icebreaker. But what are some of the challenges of single-sex schools?
I'm also a parent. My daughter attends the Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders. And one of the biggest challenges we faced was the perception, the public perception of what it means to go to an all-girls school. And I think that was probably the biggest challenge that we faced when she was a 6th grader. She's now an 8th grader.
At Webb, we started single-sex classrooms. We're not a single-sex school, but we do have single-sex classrooms in 8th grade. And we really haven't seen a lot of challenges. We only did it in 8th grade for social studies and science. We did see a lot of positives in that, but we'll talk about that later, I'm sure. And so because of the positives, we are going to make the whole campus single-sex classrooms in all content areas.
In my case, just starting the school, we really had to have a strong vision. And once we developed our mission statement, we live and breathe by that. And you can ask our girls afterwards, and they can recite it to you, because we say the mission statement every morning, and we say it together. And being part of that community is also important, but having a strong vision is equally.
I think the biggest challenge is to try to understand why it is that we think that single-sex schools are important for girls on the one hand and boys on the other, and then to design programs which correspond to our conceptualization of why we think these are important. In other words, it's not just enough to separate boys and girls. You have to know why you're doing it, and you have to design the programs to be able to take advantage of the advantages you think that you're producing by separating them.
The biggest challenge that I see in this area is the newness of a program, the public perception, and the separation in terms of young men and young women learning to work together growing together in terms of those relationships so that once they leave the high school setting, they can coexist in the workforce, in the post-secondary educational setting, and just in life.
I think I'm in agreement that perception is a definite issue. I mean, there's been several articles that have come out pretty much against single-sex schools over the past 6 to 8 months, and I can only speak from my perspective. I don't think that those arguments are valid. I think that single-sex schools have a lot more to offer and a lot more focus, as my daughter said, to offer to the students that attend. And I just think we need to get past that perception of what we think it is and sort of educate ourselves to the benefits of it.
You know, the challenge, as I see it, is one of understanding and questioning why a community or a school district would embrace the idea of single sex. What is the commentary or the criticism, therefore, of the status quo? And do we look at this alternative or educational reform as a viable vehicle to serve those members of our community? And the research I do focused on boys of color primarily, who are the most neglected, the most dismissed, the most ignored, the first that are easily sort of thrown out of the classroom, if you will, both literally and figuratively. So what is the commentary, therefore, that a community or school district would look to single sex as a viable strategy? What is the commentary on the status quo? And I think that's an important question that public dialogues like this need to continue to foster with our community.
Thank you.
As a teacher, I'd like to second what Dr. Gordon said. My job is implementation, and so it's important that I understand how to deliver instruction to females and how to deliver instruction to males and what that looks like so that I can be successful. But that's the biggest challenge I face.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists. Now we will move forward with our question and answer session.
My name is Stephanie Touchstone, and I used to work for AISD. I was a parent support specialist at Keeling Middle School, which is a magnet school, and now I work for the court system. And comparing the two entities that I now work for and used to work for, we see a lot of kids in the court system now that are being ticketed for things that they used to handle in the classroom or on the campus. And it just it appears that teachers are not trained to handle those situations. So in terms of the single-sex education, do teachers have to undergo some type of special training on how to instruct in a single-sex education environment so that we won't have so many incidences of boys of color or girls of color being overrepresented in the court system?
When we opened the school, we really did want that to happen, is that the teachers would be more girl-centered with their curriculum and instruction. So we partnered with the University of Texas, the Center for Women and Gender Studies, and they were able to give us about 3 days of professional development on the ways girls learn, and in particular the ways girls of color learn, and it was very helpful for us to design both our mode of instruction as well as our curriculum. And I suspect that AISD, who's always very diligent about teacher training, will institute the same kind of program.
Thank you.
Another response?
At Webb, since we don't have all classes that are single gender classes, it was only in 8th grade, we didn't specifically, teach or train our teachers for that specific type of instruction. But we do always, every year, provide instruction or professional development for our teachers on classroom management that works well for all students. And so it does work well for boys and for the girls. And so this year, we may take a different approach since we'll be doing it school-wide as far as the professional development targeted very specifically to the genders.
Please.
I think that's also an excellent question, and it ties into what I was saying before and what the gentleman at the end was saying before. If the reason to create single-sex schools, or if one reason is because you think there are different learning styles and different management styles that boys and girls have, then you need to train teachers to be able to respond to those different learning styles and different management styles. I know that on our side of town, classroom management for kids, black and brown kids, is an issue, and we need more training in general, but we certainly will need specialized training in terms of these kinds of schools if we're going to implement them.
Thank you. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Ann Teich. I'm a retired middle school teacher. I taught here in Austin at Porter Middle School, which preceded Ann Richards for 27 years. I have 3 questions. Number 1, is the research clear, and what is that research, that single-sex schools deliver a better education for middle school students than a co-ed school? The second question, would students have to apply to go to these single-sex schools if they're instituted in AISD? And the third question is, where would students go if they choose not to go there?
As I shared with some of the district staff, my research is focused on boys of color in education, not specifically on single sex. And that's important, but I am a consumer of that research, as we all should be, as we embark on this educational reform for our community. Colleagues at UT, and I know there was a study published in the Science Journal last year, one of the authors, co-authors, is a member of our academic community. And so some of the key sort of pushback that that article put forth, focused on how single-sex education, if done incorrectly, if done poorly, if done without the proper sort of teacher and professional development training that needs to be put in place, how it can serve to perpetuate certain stereotypes around gender, because we say essentialize the idea of gender being the predominant difference between boys and girls, as opposed to looking at class difference or race, ethnic difference, or cultural difference, etc. And I don't mean difference as a bad way, but as a way to embrace our differences. So they posited that perhaps these schooling environments, again, if done poorly, can perpetuate certain stereotypes around gender. And so I think the response needs to be to the earlier question about, how do we ensure that we sort of fight against that, is to put in place effective teacher training, administrator training, and community advocacy and training as well around this issue. And we got plenty of examples nationally, I believe, of single-sex schools, and I'm looking, for example, at the Eagle Academy in the Bronx as a national model of how, indeed, a single-sex environment for black and brown boys primarily can work with community engagement every step of the way. And their motto is something called Pacers M. I'm not going to get into the sort of the curricular model and their vision, but the very first word in that Pacers M motto is parent involvement. And so I think that has to be a key piece of the puzzle, and certainly having representative of a parent here from the local Ann Richards School, as well as in the audience, is very, very key part of that commitment the district and our community needs to make.
Thank you very much. I heard one of the last question, I believe, had to do with what were the options for those students who chose not to go to the single-sex schools. Do we have any response to that?
I can speak to it based on my experience. I don't know a whole lot about research. I've seen some of the studies that have come out. But what many of you may not know is although I am the father of Lillian, I'm also the father of Ashlyn and the father of Robert. And Ashlyn decided to apply on her own because she felt that it was, she saw the benefits that my daughter got. I mean, it's a blessing to have her here. She speaks for herself. She speaks for herself. You can see the benefit just by hearing her speak. And my daughter saw that and she applied. And unfortunately, she wasn't able to get in. But now that she's at her home school that she was going to previously. So she's making the choice to continue to apply because she sees the benefit of it. And I'll be honest with you, my son, we're going to do exactly like we did with Lillian. He's going to a single-sex school because I see the benefit. I don't know about research, but I know what's happening in my household.
And these are exactly the sort of community benefits that sort of the traditional positivist research really doesn't capture as well. I mean, we can devise all sorts of metrics for whatever ed reform we want to push through. It's important that we do that, but we got to recognize that the benefits that we can derive from these sorts of innovations aren't just about test score, achievement gap, et cetera, but they extend to the more affective domains, right? The mental health issues, the self-confidence issue, the aspirational issues that I think are some of the areas that are much more difficult to measure quantitatively, but are absolutely essential in pushing forth this sort of agenda.
Thank you for that. I think that, and we're going to try harder as a panel to address your specific question, because I don't know that we've answered everything that was asked. Dr. Karsarfin, can you address?
Right. I just wanted to be sure. I heard the question that specifically asked, under this design for Garcia and Pierce Middle Schools, would students have to apply? So to be crystal clear, the Ann Richards design is different to what's being proposed for District 1. And under that design, yes, you have to apply. Under this design, it is attendance area driven. It's taking the attendance area of Pierce, the attendance area of Garcia, making it one attendance area, and you go to your neighborhood middle school, so you do not have to apply. If the school is, still has space available, only after the neighborhoods are served would we open it up to other students who would be interested in coming. And at that point, the community might want to think about, as best practice has shown, having some kind of process for that, which is different to a neighborhood attendance area driven design. So under this design for District 1, the answer is no. If you live in the neighborhood, you do not have to apply to go to these schools.
If you have a question, please come up to the microphone. If you have a question. Yes, Father Jamie.
My name is the Reverend Dr. Jamie Mathias. On Monday, I will be declaring my candidacy for Place 2 of the Austin Independent School District Board of Trustees. And this is why I am doing it. Because the people of Dove Springs and Travis Heights, and now particularly in East Austin, feel that they are often not heard and that there is not genuine dialogue, genuine conversation in our communities. The decisions are often pre-made, predetermined, and then brought to the people. My concern is that, and my question is frankly less for the people on the stage and more for trustees and administrators who are not on the stage. My question is this: are we balanced and are we seeking the other side of the issue? When we fill a stage with people who can't even point to the challenges of same-sex schools, are we able to provide other perspectives on how it is that these affect our students? So it's less a question, more a concern that we here in Austin, particularly in East Austin, need to make sure that our community is heard and listened to and does not have the feeling that decisions are predetermined and pre-made. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
The reason we're having this discussion is so that people do not feel that I am trying to shove something down their throat. When I look at this, I actually see a viable form of a way to deliver education so that we can dispel some of the things that I'm hearing these panelists talk about. But the one thing that I can say as a District 1 trustee, and people who know me and who have followed me, whether I was a parent or on this board, when have I ever shoved anything down your throat? And when have I ever, never tried to work in your best interest? So the only thing that I can ask you to do is trust me, but I am listening to you at all times.
My name is Letitia Anderson. I was PTA president at Voma Overton Early College Prep. And my questions are, I want to make sure that we're talking about two different schools and not trying to do two schools in one. And my second question is, why not have children from Garcia and Pierce talk about wanting to go to a single gender school? Ann Richards and Pierce and Garcia, those are two different totally communities. I mean, I understand they're excited and stuff, but talk to the kids in this area and see how they feel about it.
Thank you very much. Pamela, is there a question that you heard that needs to be addressed? If not, we're going to keep rolling. Yeah, okay. Thank you for that suggestion of hearing the youth in this area, and I don't think anyone can disagree with that. Yes, sir.
My name is Don Vale. My daughter attended the Girls School of Austin and later was a graduate of this school here last June. She's going on to Carleton College and I think benefited from both experiences. I have a question particularly for Mr. Harris. I applaud your work with young men in the community. What issues do you deal with, do you address on a regular basis that you think can be dealt with in a single-gender middle school?
I work at Reagan High School, and I've been there for 8 years, but I've been involved in this field for over 12. And I am confronted each day with young men who are not achieving. I am confronted each day with young men who are dropping out, who have lost dreams, who are dealing with socioeconomic issues such as poverty, moving around, divorce, substance abuse, the whole 9 yards. We as a community owe these young people the opportunity to reach their fullest potential in life. We have to look at all of the options that are available. I think it's very important that we all leave here today with the sense of going away and doing our own research and really thinking through what's in the best interest of our young people. In a state where I don't have to tell you, we still have a lot of young people dropping out. We have young women going to college twofold more than our young men. Our young men are continuing to fill up our prison system. We're spending more to incarcerate than educate. We have to do something. And there's an old adage that I was taught a long time ago, and that is, if the car keeps going across the double lanes, check the alignment, and then if that doesn't work, replace the tires. And so we have to begin to look at options. At Reagan High School in my program, which is the XY Zone, I work with a group of, this year, 63 young men in a co-ed setting, but yet male-focused. The curriculum was male-focused, the attention they got was male-focused, and it was XY Zone because we have that chromosome, okay? But I'm proud to say in our national evaluations, 81% of the young men in our programs go on to finish high school. 83% of those young men who were involved in risky behaviors after completing our program no longer are involved in those behaviors. So I think that a setting, you know, a single-sex setting for young men could be productive if that is what that young man wants. It's just like my program. It's strictly volunteer. You have to want it. It's any program, any level of education, it starts with the student.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Jim Lacey. I'm formerly from Laredo, Texas, now living here. I'm going to read this very quickly. Nothing makes a writer look more like a yokel than a page full of misspelled words. And if that page happens to be a resume, the results will be disastrous. Once upon a time, spelling boiled down to memorization. So did the times tables. That is no longer the case. We give our kids spell check to make sure they can spell. We give them digital devices to make sure they can add, subtract, divide, multiply. We give them television that suggests to them that real life is lived in 10-minute bits, followed by 5 minutes of advertising. Then we wonder why we're dealing with things like attention deficit disorder. Now we want to talk ourselves into believing that separating boys and girls, a reality of life as absolute as sex and marriage, will cure a core problem which finds our nation ranked number 17 in science, number 23 in math. Crying out loud, we're not even in the top 10 anymore. And besides, coeducation dominates our world, and more instances it works than not. I'm not opposed to the idea of this. I'm just saying it's not where the core problem lies. The only thing wrong with our children is that they can no longer read and write. It's that simple. And until we devise the means, thank you, for correcting that, we are not going to fix the core problem facing our down-spiraling educational system. If a body cannot read, he cannot write. At least not nearly as well, with as much speed and concentration and as with much delivery as he needs to, especially in today's world where his digital devices are delivering exchange communication around the world at virtually the speed of light. I would therefore like to propose an idea that addresses this issue and sinks real teeth into the problem, namely a revamping of how we teach. It is an imperfect idea, to be sure. Thank you. I'm not a researcher, nor I have any special credentials, but none of us has to be a rocket scientist to understand that ranking 17th in science and 23rd in math is troubled with reading and writing first and foremost. We are not delivering the scientists and inventors and general genius to the nation and to the world stage that we used to. Here is what I suggest we do. Number one, make classes 3 hours long. Number two, cover only 2 subjects a day. Example, English in the morning 8 to 11, history in the afternoon 1 to 3. The 2-hour gap in between these 2 classes, 11 to 1, will give students 2 hours to eat lunch and to wind down a little, and also to visit with theirs. Number 3, cover a full chapter or 2 or 3, whatever can be covered in the first 2 hours and 15 minutes, and require the students to read aloud, or silently, or a combination. Number 4, the remaining 45 minutes would require the students to write on 3 topics covered during the reading phase, delivering about 15 minutes for each topic that they would cover. Number 5, I'm almost done, thank you for your patience. We would no longer have to assign homework because they just did their homework and they were just tested on it. At the end of the first day, the children will have been exposed to 6 hours of reading and writing. The first day. 6 hours of reading and writing. That's probably more reading than 50% of them do the whole year. At the end of the first week, they'll have been exposed to 30 hours of reading and writing. At the end of the first month, 120 hours. And at the end of the first year, 1,000 hours of reading and writing. I beg this body to organize a pilot class to test this idea in conjunction with other ideas we are hearing here this morning. I thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you.
I would love to congratulate your daughter. Obviously reads a great deal, and she can write a great deal. Thank you.
Yes.
Sí, buenos días, mi nombre es Dariela Domínguez. Mi hija estaba cursando en la escuela Allen Elementary en el este de Austin. Lamentablemente tuve que sacarla porque nos dieron la opción el distrito de una escuela charter. La idea mía es de que le dieron la opción de charter, van a perder más, todavía más el distrito escolar, más estudiantes, por ese mensaje que les mandaron a todos los padres de que las escuelas charter pueden ser mejores que las escuelas públicas. Perdón.
My daughter used to attend Allen Elementary, but now I had to pull her out after we were given the option of either going to a charter school or staying with the other schools in the district. I think that the district is going to lose a lot more students now that you have given parents the idea that charter schools are better than our public schools.
Ahora, un comentario, les pido a los padres asistentes que investiguen antes de venir a las juntas, porque yo también estuve involucrada así al principio. Todo dicen muy bonito, pero ya cuando investiga uno se da cuenta de que no todo es bonito.
I ask parents and others present to please investigate, do your research before you come to the meetings, because when we come to the meetings, we are told everything's beautiful, everything is great, but once you investigate, you realize that that's not the case.
Ahora, en base a la investigación, en el internet, bajo la televisora, no sé si ustedes conocen, Univisión, dice, la Unión Americana de Libertades Civiles demandó recientemente al Departamento de Educación de Estados Unidos para que cese los programas de un solo sexo.
Some of the research I read online on the Univision television, when I did my research there, I found something that says that the American Civil Liberties Union, the
demandó recientemente
has a claim against the Department of Education of the United States, asking them to stop all single-sex education programs.
Okay. Por considerarse inconstitucionales.
This was done because the ACLU considers these programs unconstitutional.
Ahora, se los dejo solamente para que piensen y tomen sus conclusiones. Ahora mi pregunta es, ¿cuál es la diferencia entre un hombre y una mujer para el aprendizaje? ¿Cuál es la diferencia? porque se puede aplicar en las escuelas existentes, no volviendo a cerrar y a mover a niños que están a gusto en una escuela con sus maestros, como estaba mi hija, yendo a otra parte del sector, que muchas veces ustedes no conocen las escuelas alrededor, solamente conocen las escuelas que asisten sus hijos. Cuando pasó esto con mi hija, fui a ver a las escuelas Ortega, Gobali, que sus condiciones no son de igualdad, sus condiciones de la escuela no es igual a la condición en la que estaba mi hija. Esa es mi pregunta.
I share this information with you for you to think about it. My question is, what is the difference between boys and girls and how they learn? Why can we not apply the information that we have in regards to that in the schools we already have? Why do we have to separate them, send them to new schools? Why do we have to send kids to different schools like it happened at my daughter's school? When I went to visit the neighboring schools where the kids would be transferred to, like Gobali and Ortega, I realized that the schools were very different and did not offer the same services as Allen. The same services and conditions as Allen.
Panel, any response to the question?
Se las dejo para que investiguen y en el próximo foro invito a todos los padres a que vayan a la nueva junta, como aquí dice, del día 31 de julio, para que hagan sus investigaciones y ustedes decidan qué es lo más importante. No quiero que vuelva a pasar en otras áreas lo que pasó en mi comunidad. Y otro comentario. Tanto hemos luchado por la igualdad de género que pienso yo que este es un retroceso a ese gran avance que tenemos entre la igualdad de género, tanto la mujer como el hombre. Así que desde chiquitos tenemos que educarlos a compartir y a...
Let's see if we can answer your first question. Why, the question of why.
Well, she's also talking about gender equality and other issues, which I think are important issues. We just had 3 or 4 people talk at us. For the person who accused the panel of all being supporters of this issue, without asking us whether we were or not, I would say that I'm not, in general, a supporter of single-sex schools just to have single-sex schools. I am a supporter of good education, of quality education, and I'm a supporter of trying to figure out what the problems that black and brown kids face in terms of getting a good education in this school district have been, and I'm a supporter of taking dramatic action to try to change those things. So I'm a supporter of that. In this particular case, it is clear that doing the same thing over and over again is not going to solve anything. Yeah. So something different needs to be done. There is some good research that demonstrates that there are some differences between the way men and women learn. It is certainly true, as this last person was saying, that there's gender inequality in this country, right? And so it is clear that same-sex schools for girls benefit girls precisely because of gender inequality. In other words, if girls are in a situation where they can more freely engage, when they can think of themselves as being intellectual rather than just sexual objects, when they can think of themselves as being able to do STEM rather than just having to focus on other kinds of soft sciences, et cetera, then we see that it's very beneficial for them, all right? I also want to respond to the gentleman here who accused us of not, or was accusing the district of not caring about the fundamental educational skills being taught. I think that's definitely an issue, but I don't think it's clear that instituting same-sex schools would not address those issues. If they don't address those issues, then I think there's a problem. But as I understand it, the district is trying something new which will address some of the issues that girls and boys face in coeducational circumstances, but I would expect that these schools to be designed in a fundamentally new way. This is one of the things I was talking about the principal of the Ann Richards School about, that one of the, it's not just the school is single sex, it's also that it was an attempt to create something new from the ground up, with respect for the kids and the parents, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what we need. We need something new. What we have now doesn't work.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Angela, Miss Austin Plus America, and I have an oldest son who's pursuing his dreams in Africa in Peace Corps. He just graduated, the first in his lineage to graduate from college. And the reason I'm here, I want to ask this question. I think the biggest challenge with our parents is they feel like they don't have a choice in this. They feel like they're going to be forced, right? I think that's pretty clear. All of us want our kids to succeed, right? So my question is, even if we didn't move ahead with the single-sex schools, because what I saw in the actual, the beautiful thing that they put together last time, I don't know what you call that, a PowerPoint, there were options there that worked for my boys, like Avid. You know, how does a kid know what to shoot for? They've never seen a college. I've never seen that. Do we have those programs that are going to go in place? So this is not just about single-sex schools. What this did is brought people together in a safe forum to talk about, okay, what can we put together to make work? Who here wants their kid to succeed? Everybody does, right? Everybody wants their kid to succeed. So it's not necessarily that. But so here's my question. Can this be forced on parents, or can this also be used as a platform to come up with other solutions?
Please.
First off, mamá, le agradezco mucho el comentario que hizo hace ratito. Let me get to the issue here around this conversation. And one of the things that I've seen around the country is that there's a lot of momentum right now nationally building around single-sex education. You know, a decade ago, there was a handful of schools. Now you see upwards of 500-600 around the country. And I think that, again, as my earlier comment, this is a larger sort of commentary on what's going on, boys and girls. And if nothing else, this conversation, as we walk away, ought to remind us about this sort of persistent, pervasive difference in educational outcomes for boys and girls. And I realize that's looking at the symptoms as opposed to the core issue here, right? But we're at least talking about this issue of boys and girls and the key differences. As somebody who looks at the data on sort of the output end, finishing high school, getting into college, graduating college, going into career, those data are sobering, and they're especially sobering for black and brown boys. And we look even all the way down to the educational pipeline and look at involvement in preschool or early childhood education, the rates of being diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, being referred to special education tracks, of being held back a grade, twice more than girls, on and on and on. In particular, the pervasive data around school disciplinary policy and how that ultimately is administered differentially for boys and girls, especially black and brown boys, and especially poor boys. And so that lack that advocacy in terms of a parent or some sort of a guardian, that lack the advocacy within the system perhaps. So these are pervasive data both in Texas and nationally that have been getting worse over time. And it's hard, as somebody who studies these issues, to not walk away with throwing your hands up, becoming frustrated. So at the very minimum, we're having an opportunity here as a community and as a school district to address this disparity of outcomes for boys and girls. And ultimately, I agree wholeheartedly that this is not, in my view, and again, as I understand it, an issue of the school district or anybody trying to ram down anything down our throats, but an opportunity to have this dialogue is first and foremost, I think, a positive step in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Karen Brown. I have a 7th grader at Pierce Middle School, or Pierce College Preparatory. He has been planning to go to Pierce all of his life. Now you bring up this single-sex school. Why, Mommy? Why us? Why is this happening to us? Why, like at Webb, if you want to try that, instead of turning 2 schools into single-sex, implement the same thing that you did for Webb into the school and try it out, instead of just automatically changing this school. My son is in a band. It's no way, you already know. Band is not gonna work without the females, and it's not gonna work without the males. You have to have both to play in the band. Same for sports, same for the education. This is a learning process for our kids. Y'all talked about the numbers from elementary school. The referrals was 100. Then when they got to middle school, it went to 700. But oh, when they got to high school, it dropped. You are dealing with teenagers going through puberty, going through adolescence, learning who they are. And we're trying to take that away from them by putting something on them. Give them a chance. Start it out with Webb, put a couple of classes in Pierce, Garcia, see how it works. If it works, then you change the whole schools, but not just Pierce and Garcia, all the middle schools. It shouldn't be just in our area. If it worked for one, it works for everybody.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
My name is Edwin Ochoa, and I'm a former educator and also a concerned both citizen and resident in the AISD school district. So I do have a question just specifically, what are some sources that we can take back with us as far as research is concerned, just so that we can be aware of the pros and cons of single-sex school implementation? And then also just a quick comment, sort of going off of what Dr. Gordon was saying, I do want to applaud the dialogue that's happening, the school board, the panel, the superintendent for pushing forward changes, because if we look at the data beyond what is published, we can see that there does need to be change within the school district. And so I do applaud you for bringing these forward. And echoing from what the students had said earlier today, what stuck out to me was teachers, teachers, teachers. So it was focused on what the teachers were doing for them in the classroom. So while I do think that single-sex schools can be a good option for us, let's think about what those teachers are doing and try to implement that district-wide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Efrain Jurado, and I don't have any special credentials, but I've been here in the States for more than 25 years. And I used to be a teacher in Mexico for more than 10 years, and so my wife did. And I work in a single-sex and a both-sex schools in elementary when I was there. I'm not really sold about this project or experiment that you're about to do. I think the right idea is to give people a choice, and they will decide. You know, it's not fair for the kids to be forced to go into something that they don't know, we don't know. I mean, and it's discriminatory, just to start with. And the reason why is because you're going to be making a single sex for boys, single sex for girls, and maybe you're missing single sex for gays. I don't know. I don't know. It's something that you need to think about. I don't see any good. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's wrong. Let's leave it like that. I agree with you. There's something that needs to be done in this education process, but I agree with Mr. Harris. I mean, we're not going to force the kids to do that. When my son, they did an experiment when we used to live in Colorado. Didn't work. It was a fiasco. It was a fiasco. We ended up fighting very often with the director because they made the decision for my son, and they made it for us, and I was so unhappy. And they said that it was going to be something. They mixed two grades, trying to get the best of it, and then my son was really behind. And I told him since the beginning, you didn't give me a choice, and I was fighting again and again. We have to fight with the district school for that decision they made against our decision. I see this happening again here, you know. And I have a 16-year-old boy attending to high school. He's going to be right now he's a freshman. He's going to be a sophomore. When we lived in Dallas about 2 years ago, they tried to do something similar, but not exactly like that. They were trying to separate boys and girls in the same school where he was attending to middle high. Didn't work. I mean, you need to be careful about what you do, but the very best thing you can do is make people happy when they go to school. And I don't think this is the way to make them happy.
Can you sum it up, because we're running out of, you've run out of time.
No, pretty much that's the idea.
Well, thank you for that input. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning to the panel. My name is Betty Johnson. I'm the current LBJ PTA president, at Andrews Elementary. And I have 3 sons, and they went through Andrews, Pierce, and LBJ. And to the first question I have is that, do any of you live in the Pierce-Garcia attendance zone? Okay, the next question is that, have any of you been to Pierce or Garcia in the last year? Okay, so that's good to know, because the first thing when I walked in, and I worked with Ms. Bradley, and I don't know if any of you all know me, but the fact too, to be standing here again, it's like I'm one of the parents who, when Pierce was trying to get closed, to fought to save Pierce. When my sons was in there, my son is getting ready to graduate now. When he was in there, and we started this fight at Pierce, he's getting ready to graduate LBJ next year, and actually, he made it. So he has, like, he's one of the top 10% of LBJ High School. So there are some kids that do make it out of these schools, but we don't hear that. Like the children were saying, the students were saying about Ann Richards, that you hear the negative connotation about boys and girls school. The same thing you hear about the negative aspect of, wow, I just got up here, about Pierce and Garcia. And I think, too, if we start some of that negativism, and my thing is that, did you all see the study that was supposed to have been done, the questions that asked the kids, like, how do they feel at Pierce and Garcia about boys and girls school? Did you all see those results? There was supposed to have been a study about that. And so I was just wondering, what makes it work for my boys that it doesn't work for other schools? Or other parents that are in the school. Those kind of things, too, we've been asking, too, is that, too, and I walk in, like Ms. Bradley said, she didn't want to see it kind of shoved down our throat, but I'm going to say, too, as a parent, and I feel I have the right to say, too, because of the fact, too, that I'm on the DAC, the CAC, I'm on the bond committee. If any parent have a right to say something and to have fought for this, is that when I walked in, it just seemed like, man, this panel looks like it's trying to shove something down our throat. This is just my perception, because I don't see anybody from the community. I don't even see our principals up here. I see Webb, and I'm like, what does this have to do, with us? So I just think, too, that these kind of things, too, and that's kind of what happens to our community now.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Amy Wright. I'm a parent of a middle school, AISD middle schooler. I also happen to be a former PTA president, and I'm in a teacher certification program at Houston Tillotson University. I'm interested to ask a question as a parent. I've seen girls explode on the scene for my soon-to-be 7th grader, and I'm curious about the issue of segregating boys and girls from one another during early adolescence. I would imagine that segregation from the opposite sex would be a detractor for boys and girls in that age group, and maybe part of the reason that there's a perception that this wouldn't be good for kids because they don't want to do it. So I'm curious to know about segregation, whether there are benefits of it or detriments. I would imagine there's a, right, I was going to say, imagine there's a focus on education, and there's also a potential decline in socialization around how to manage romantic relationships, which is what's happening in middle school from my experience.
Thank you for that. We have an exuberant of answers from our students, and as they're coming forward, is there anything from the panel?
Yes. I'd like to speak to your question about segregating students at this age. I'm a new teacher, but I've seen both. I've done, and with the same students, I actually moved with my students from 7th to 8th. And in 7th, they were all one, and we were segregated, as you'd say, or split by gender in 8th grade. And I want to speak to the thing about, do the students agree? Because Oscar benefited from the program, and he'll say he benefited from the program, but he doesn't support the program. And I think that's important, that we need to make decisions sometimes for our students. They don't necessarily agree with it. I think based on the differences between 7th and 8th grade, the benefit I saw in discipline referrals, it may be chalked up that I was a first-year teacher, but I probably wrote 5 referrals total last year. And the difference is how I'm able to deal with my boy classes versus my girl classes. And maybe I'm a unique teacher in that it's just innate for me to be able to handle those situations differently. But I don't think so. I think that with adequate training, it becomes a tool for teachers to be able to differentiate for the needs of their students, which is something we talk about a lot. To the point of reading and writing in our classrooms, I agree, but we are also dealing with a LET population here on the east side, and I think that Garcia is similar in demographics to Webb, and I think that we can have shared experiences that benefit all of us. But anyway, at the end of it is just differentiation and being able to meet the needs of your students and being able to group students differently. My male students, you know, guys will be guys. I think that's exactly what Oscar's quote was. And you allow that flexibility within the classroom, and giving that kind of freedom and allowing for that kind of freedom and not having to play, you know, you need to quiet down, you need to make sure that you're giving our female the chance to speak, and also not having females be shadowed and not feel like they have a voice. And so going from 7th to 8th grade, maybe my students just grew up, but in my girl classes, I saw an increased engagement and an increased willingness to engage, which I think is what we need if we want to push this achievement gap or close this achievement gap.
Thank you very much. And we have the ladies from Ann Richards have a word to say about this.
Hello again. To answer your question about the benefits of, I wouldn't necessarily call it segregation. I think it would be called separating us, and segregation is a very, very strong word. But for me personally, the benefit is I've learned so much more than I went to Bedichek for a year, and I was belittled and picked on. Some of my teachers did not like me at all. And once I got to Ann Richards, I didn't have to worry about that anymore. And about the romantic relationships, my social life has not been inhibited at all. Let me just put that out there.
Okay. All right. You don't have to go into any more detail.
I'm not going to go into any more detail about that. But
not with Daddy on the stage.
I can say that school is not the only place where I'm going to meet the opposite sex. It's not. And that's not what I need to be focusing on in high school anyway. That's not my goal. My goal is not to get married, have 4 kids. My goal is to be the next big star on the stage. That's my goal. I don't need a boy for that. That's me. So I don't think that my romantic life being inhibited is a very difficult issue for me, because that's not what I'm thinking about.
Thank you.
To the question about how it may be difficult for girls and boys to like adjust to like single-sex education at the adolescent age, I mean, in response to that, I would say, I mean, it really depends on, I mean, it varies among people. You can't say something works for one person, if it works for one person, it'll work for everyone else. But from what I've seen in my school, single sex is like, I mean, it hasn't like, I really don't feel that we would be any different in terms of like our social life. I mean, our adolescent years, we were like, what, 13, 14 when we first, 12, when we first went to, when we first started Ann Richards, and I mean, I mean, nothing has really, going to Ann Richards hasn't impacted us in a negative way when it comes to starting single-sex education at a young age in adolescence. And if anything, it's helped us. It really has. I mean, you've learned to like be comfortable with yourself, be comfortable with who you are. The teachers, once again, have helped us with that, and then the girls have helped us with that. And then we're able to go out into the world and be comfortable with who we are and expand our horizons in that way. And I mean, that's just what I've seen at our school.
Thank you for that. Yes, sir.
Okay, so basically what I'm hearing is opinions. You, Ms. Harris, and y'all are only talking opinions, okay? If you're gonna bring this up to the community, you need to talk facts, okay? Everyone's been saying that you needed a middle school student to confirm what y'all are trying to do. Well, I'm a middle school student. I'm going to 7th grade. I'm gonna let you know some facts, okay? Scientists have proven that guys and girls separated have made a better, you know, it's better, okay? But you can't have a football team without cheerleaders, okay? Okay? You can't do that. That's not right. So what I'm trying to say is,
Good job.
I'm trying to say, don't let this be a community problem. Just, if you're gonna keep this and try and change 2 schools that are not even in the same community, all right, keep that with the school board, okay? Don't make it a community problem, because these people, they've came here to listen to y'all talk, and they wanna hear facts. They don't wanna hear your opinion. I'm gonna just tell you straight up. That's how I feel.
And what school are you at?
Thank you for being straight up. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, so my name is Laura Dever, and I actually just moved here from New York City, where I taught at a single-sex school. I taught at Girls Prep Charter School, which is part of the Public Prep Network. And I actually have a question for Mr. Garcia and Mr. Winship, and perhaps this will get some facts out there. You mentioned briefly in the beginning that you would like to enumerate the successes you saw of the programs that you had that were within your middle school that you intend to expand. And I would love to listen for 2 minutes as you talk about what those successes were.
As I said earlier, we did pilot the single gender classes in 8th grade the last 3 years, and through a lot of quantitative and qualitative data, we did make the decision to make it school-wide. The things that we did notice a lot is what Mr. Winship did say, is that there was a lot more focus on the actual assignments, the projects, so there was a lot more student engagement in the single gender classes than the co-ed classes. And so the achievement also in our science and social studies classes there was increments of 20 points in science each year. And so that also gave us some more evidence that it is working, and that we'd want to, bring it more to, the rest of the grades. And the reason we did not do the other grades is because we didn't have 2 true teams in the other grades. Because the evidence that we were gathering early on was that it would be a good thing to do it and to expand it to the other grades. And so now with our population growing, and more students we have more teachers now, and so we're able to do 2 teams on each grade level. So we're going to be able to have, the flexibility to do the 2 single-sex classes.
Thank you very much.
I also want to recognize the district for an outstanding effort at outreach on this issue. This is the best that I've seen the district do, reaching out to the community for input, and I think it's as a result of some complaints in the past, and I think this is a job well done. What I would like to see is an effort also made to have the same kind of outreach, the same kind of effort to bring community together for a panel of parent experts and teacher experts from the community, no matter what we decide to do on these single-sex schools, to hear from parents and teachers what do they think needs to be improved at their schools, because I don't think the question is whether or not we need change, but there are different ideas about what kind of change we should have, and so I would urge the district to engage the community in that way as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr.
Yes, sir.
Nance,
Yes.
if I can back up to a parent earlier who talked a little bit about segregation, so to speak. I work with a male involvement program in a co-ed high school where we work with young men specifically. And a big part of what we talk about is relationships with young ladies, in which they're then able to go out and practice what they've learned. As I've stated earlier, it's one of those things, like Dr. Gordon said, we haven't identified oppositions on it. So it's still, for some of us, one of those things that we're kind of learning and hearing and learning the pros and cons of it. And as I stated earlier, one of those things that you would deal with is the interaction, the social interaction between males and females growing up, so that they leave high school and for all these years they have not interacted with the opposite gender, and now they're in the workplace. Now they're in the college. How do they handle a female supervisor? How do they handle all of those types of things? So that would have to be an issue that certainly has to be addressed. To the young man that spoke eloquently earlier, let me say that I speak from opinion, but I speak from opinion that I've lived in this community. I'm an AISD product. I have been on the front lines in this, what I call a war of saving souls now for over 11 years. And each day and every day, I'm confronted with young men who have the potential, but for some odd reason, they're not getting there. And I'm determined to find out and do what is necessary to get them there, because they deserve the same opportunities as anybody across town, up the street, and around the block. So I speak from opinion because there are enough number of people up here, but I speak from the perspective of being a parent, living in this neighborhood, working in that school where I see a high attrition rate, a high dropout rate, a high failure rate, and also speaking from a program where 16 young men who graduated from my program last year, 12 are all enrolled in college and still there. So I get the benefits of saying both sides. Now, let me say one other thing, and I don't want this to be missed either. Education is a three-pronged plug. It's teacher, student, educator. And we must not lose focus of that.
Parent.
We must not lose focus. We can say teacher management, sure, and I believe in that too because I'm in there. But I also know too that parent involvement is just as vital and essential to the development of these young people as anything. And I just wanted to state that.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Hi. My name is Vincent Tovar. I'm a Go Valley dad, but I've also worked at Pickle Elementary, and I've worked for Safe Place at Dobie and at Reagan. And so I want to thank you, Mr. Harris, and thank you, Ms. Chapman, for all the great work that you've done. But again, I agree with Dr. Jamie that you guys aren't really answering, like, there are a lot of questions that should have been answered before we got here to this point. So I think that it should be this single-sex middle schools, like one of our leader in Pride of the East Side organization has said, this single-sex middle schools isn't necessarily the problem. Like, idea which was forced down my family's throat wasn't necessarily the problem. The problem is that community is not at the meetings, the planning meetings on day one. The problem is that community is not invited and welcome to the planning meetings on day one. That's the problem. So how do we answer that problem? Why are we not asking what is the problem? Why are we not working together to solve those problems? And talk about having counselors actually counsel. Talk about having parent contracts actually implemented. But a lot of questions are going to be about where are the drawbacks on the website? Who's going to teach us about the drawbacks? Why are we having competitive schools? Like, why is Dobie College Prep, but Webb's just Webb Middle School? Why is Pickle College Prep? Other elementary schools aren't college prep.
Let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you for a minute because those are excellent questions. Can you please write those down and get them to the group? Please do that.
I will say yes,
in
but
in the interest of time, if we're going to get most of the people in, we've got to get beyond where we are. So
I respect that. The one thing I'll say is that I've done that. And that's why I'm still here.
Okay, I appreciate that. Do it again. Yes.
I'm Betty Davis. I'm a product of Austin Independent School District, and I have 4 children that are also products of Austin Independent School District. My daughter graduated here. My other 3 graduated Crockett, and they all went on to college. What I wanted to say was that when Ann Richards was first formed, I thought about, what about the boys? I felt like if we should have an all-girls school, then we should have an all-boys school also. Because I feel like the boys have been left out. And like we say that in elementary school, the little boys are leading the girls until they get to like the 1st grade. Then we somehow lose them. In kindergarten, boys are leading the girls. Scores are higher than the girls. But then they get into 1st grade and the girls go off and pass them. So we need to know, and like Oscar said, that let them be themselves. They need a format where they can be themselves and be focused. And so we won't lose so many of the guys. I also work for Austin Independent School District, but I'm housed in juvenile court. And I see our young men coming into juvenile court. And I just want to say that my neighbor's granddaughter goes to Ann Richards, and I hear all the great things about Ann Richards. One of our former teachers taught there also. And at juvenile court, I have never seen, I had to enroll a student out of juvenile court that was from Ann Richards School.
Thank you for sharing. It's a good piece of information. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Mike. I'm the father of a AISD 1st grader. My concern here is that I understand that the schools in question are facing challenges, but my concern here is by focusing on the question of gender, you're focusing on something that misses the point that really gets to the challenges that are facing our schools. The research on this is inconclusive at best, so there's no proven track record to say that this is the answer. I understand the successes at Ann Richards are laudable, but I think it's comparing apples and oranges to talk about Ann Richards, which sounds like it functions something like a magnet, has been able to attract money and so forth, versus a program that's going to be imposed on 2 attendance zones. And I think I understand the call for radical solutions. This is not to paper over the problems problems facing our schools. But let's talk about radical solutions that are meaningful, not something that is sort of an untested experimental idea. Why does a student have to go to Ann Richards to go and get into a great dance program? Why aren't these things available to all our students across the district? What about the testing? We're talking about a dropout epidemic. What about all the testing that is deadening to our students, makes school mind-numbing, and we've only increased that with all the benchmarks that are happening? What about, you know, experienced teachers and so forth? I feel like we're trying to deal with a problem which is actually about inequality in our school district.
Thank you.
And missing that point by focusing on this issue of gender, which is not the central problem. Thanks.
Thank you. Panelists, are you able to extend 10 minutes? Can we? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I wanted to talk a little bit about that also, because over the years we've seen the United States education system go down the toilet, and in Texas it's worse. But we've also seen, I'm sorry, I'm kind of short, can you hear me? I've also seen that the class sizes have expanded significantly over the years, and there have been more and more high-stakes testing being implemented and imposed on the students. And I think those are the things that have a direct correlation with the status of our education system. What has been proven to increase the quality of education are lower class sizes, not separating the genders, but just making class sizes smaller so that teachers can actually pay attention to all the students, and all the students get the interest that they need. And I hear that people say, you know, boys should be able to be boys, well, girls should be able to be girls, and those two things aren't different. I think all of the students need time where they can, you know, jump around, go have recess and come back and be able to study and learn and read, but only in a smaller class size and with actual education and not test prep will they get the education that they need.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Lori Barzano, and I'm the co-chair of the Coalition to Strengthen Austin Urban Schools. So first off, I just want to get this on the record. From what I'm hearing today, we are talking about district-run schools. We are not talking about subcontract charters, okay? The second thing that I would like to say is something that the coalition's been saying for 2 years. The district needs to get in place a process for sitting down with school communities, listing their strengths and weaknesses, discussing their challenges, discussing options for addressing those challenges, vetting those different options, and having the community actually be the one who builds the solution. This is not about bringing outside solutions into a situation. This is about sitting down with the community and addressing the problems that exist in the community and the school, because we really aren't addressing the evidence-based outcomes that are proven successful. We need to deal with small class size, we need to deal with support services, and we need to deal with poverty, which is the real issue, the real elephant on the table.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Ken Zarefis. I'm a teacher. I was a former teacher in Austin ISD for 12 years at Burnett Middle School, high needs population. I am a father of a first grader and of an eighth grader here in Austin ISD, and I'm also president of Education Austin, the Teacher and Employees Union. I think one of my big concerns coming in here today was the muddiness of this, is that we're talking about single sex, and we're being given examples that are not the example that's being proposed for Garcia and Pierce. Ann Richards is not the model that we're following. The Moody Foundation and the school that the district is putting together is much more akin to that. So let's keep that conversation with that. This is different. As we begin to roll out examples across the country that are single-gender schools, let's make sure if we're going to do that, we do that appropriately by identifying schools that will be exactly like what the district wants to do in Garcia and Pierce. Let's not sugarcoat, let's not mislead people on what we're doing here. I'm not saying what you're doing is insidious necessarily to want that, it's a want. What I'm saying is how it's presented is very important, that it's very clear that the community, the kids, and the teachers that are affected by this understand this. And to this point, it hasn't been that way. And I really urge that that happens. In my class of 12 years, boys were boys and girls were girls. it doesn't take a single gender school for a boy to be a boy. And I think that that's really important to know. And I think it's really important, and I agree with you, they gotta want it. They gotta want it. And so this model isn't a want, it's an imposition. This is your option. So my question, there is a question here. How does this model, how can we make this model comparable to an Ann Richards and to other schools? And actually, how are we doing that and being appropriate in our interaction with the district and letting them be informed in an appropriate way?
Thank you. Panel, hold on and trying to answer the question until we've heard the last three. And then we'll speak. Yes.
I'm Gilly Harris. I'm a parent. I have a first grader, and he's going to be in first grade, and we've just started navigating AISD in the public school systems, and I have to say that it's been very disappointing to me with the testing and the funding cuts, et cetera. Everybody's already addressed it, and this gentleman who just spoke actually addressed my concerns and questions. I personally, for my child, would like to see him in a single-sex education environment, and was very excited when I read and heard that this was coming up. Coming here today, though, I'm a bit discouraged because I find that it's being imposed on a district that doesn't necessarily want it. They're not being asked if they want it. What is going to happen to the little girls and big girls that go to these schools? And also, why can't we do it in a model like he mentioned, and like these girls, who I want my son to be the male version of these two girls right here. I'm just so impressed. And I want him to go to the male version of the Ann Richards School.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Cindy Behringer, and in addition to being a parent and a grandparent and a community member, I've been a teacher for more years than I'm going to tell you. And, you know, I can't imagine what teaching, what my life would have been like in school, and my children's life in school, and my students' life without the wonderful, rich, different gender relationships, or ultra gender. By the way, we should be saying same gender or schools instead of single gender instead of sex, because that's a proper terminology, and I'd really appreciate that. But these relationships that are built between the same gender and the opposite gender are often more educational than what that teacher's up there teaching you. And I think that's really, really important. And I've taught students of all races, of both genders, and I do teach them differently, but not based on their race or their gender. I've had students that come from wealthy families. I've had many, many students who came from very poor families and families that were struggling. Some of the parents working 2 or 3 jobs and didn't have a lot of time to be involved with their children. And that is the problem. I mean, I've seen it for years and years, and that is the problem. I had one African-American boy who could not pass the tax test it took him 4 or 5 attempts, and when he passed it on the 5th attempt, it was after he had gotten the money to have his abscess tooth fixed that he had been dealing with for over a year and a half. So that's the problem. That's what needs to be addressed. And again, I think it's important for people to go to school with the same gender.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, both genders.
Thank you. Yes, sir. And
My
then we
name's
have
Steve
one back.
Swanson. I'm a community member. I've participated in the last 5 years in East Austin on a CACAD East Side Memorial. I'm on several joint task forces that serve to find kids jobs so they can stay in school and get income and a credit and a degree while they're doing so. On a task force that helps kids find mentors in order for them to be nurtured in their life and supported and sustain that support, and part of a judicial support task force that helps kids in our school system focus on keeping kids in schools and not sent to court. I'm here today. I've got my question, Reverend. I've got my question. I hope to get a phone call in a week. And I'd like to encourage us as a community to rise and stand at the legislature this upcoming session and get rid of Chapter 39, which is punishing our kids and testing our kids to death, and focus on modifying and getting rid of Chapter 37, which is not, the legislators even agree, is not solving a so-called discipline problem, But I also would like for us to encourage our school board members to look at leadership responsibilities in Chapter 11 of the Texas Education Code, which really are to drive community-based solutions so we design, build, and own our schools as a community, and they're not forced upon us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Joanne Bartz, and I'm a Vice President of the University Hills Neighborhood Association. Our president, Mrs. Vera Givens, whom I'm sure an awful lot of you know, not only here but throughout the city, sends her regrets. She had a dire family emergency out of town. But I am speaking for her as well as for myself. My credentials, I've been in this community for over 45 years. Our 5 children have been involved with Harris, Pecan Springs, Pierce, Reagan. I believe they got a good education, all of this. I am going to speak to something I haven't heard really addressed clearly so far. I have the distinct impression, regrettably, that this is already a decided matter. It shouldn't be. This community is always pictured in the press and everywhere else that you're not involved, you don't care. Tell me that tonight. Tell me that today. That's not true. We're very involved. We're very knowledgeable, but we're not consulted until after the fact. I went to a previous meeting and I gave the AISD powers to be, God forbid, certain questions. And I'm going to speak to what has been mentioned before. We're not going to get over here anything comparable to the Ann Richards School, because there's a difference of opinion, east side versus west side. Let's just face reality. Let's be realistic about this matter and face it up front. We have never, and we probably, as far as I can tell, never will get what the west of I-35 gets in their schools, period.
Thank you.
I'm not through.
Yes, ma'am.
So my question is this: will all such single-sex schools placed east of I-35 be provided the same level of excellence as that provided to the Ann Richards School? I'm talking faculty, administration, teachers, funding, text, supplies, publicity. And my comment is this: if the AISD uses different and less acceptable metrics and rubrics in placing single-sex schools east of I-35 than was used and is being used for the Ann Richards School, this exercise will be viewed, I can guarantee it, by the East Side communities as just another experimental concept which, from its inception, is expected to fail. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
Please.
What?
Please.
One last thing I forgot to say when I said I was a product of Austin Independent School District. I am a product of Pierce Middle School. And what I learned back in the day from Pierce Middle School was resilience and acceptability to change. I think once these students know that their education is at the forefront of this project, that they will be acceptable to change. And parents, we have to, because people were against Ann Richards, and they are very exemplary today. It may not be the same model that you want to look at, but it is a model, and it is a stepping stone. It is a platform. These students need something different. The district is trying to give you all something different and give our students something different. Thank you.
Thank you. Guys, let me close out with this. Now, here's the deal. This panel did not come to sell single-sex or single-gender schools. They came as a resource to answer questions that you might have regarding single-sex or single-gender schools. So don't leave here thinking that they came with something to sell. They didn't come with anything to sell. They came as people who had been asked to bring their expertise and their experiential databases to you. So there's no reason for us to treat them with any hostility. Secondly, if we're going to solve the education issue in Austin, it has to be we. It can never be them, they, or us. It has to be we. We have to do this together. So the sooner we can take off the swords and put everything down and sort of work together, the sooner we're going to get this thing resolved. Now, whether or not we go with the single-sex schools or not is really not the discussion that I'm having, because I don't have a dog in that hunt either. But what I do believe is that it is important that we raise the bar. We got to raise the standard. We got to shut off the gap, not close the gap, but eliminate the gap. That's where we must end up. So at the close of the day, if we've done nothing but air our differences and made very good rhetorical remarks and everybody's gotten a hand praise, if that's all you've done, you've wasted a lot of time, and I don't have that much time left. Yes.
Good morning. I'm a teacher at Pierce Middle School. I've been at Pierce Middle School for 20 years. Taught Miss Bradley's kids, Miss Johnson's kids. And, you know, it kind of bothers me that I don't see anybody from Pierce or Garcia involved, because I think that not only do you need to speak to the community, you need to speak to people that are actually working in there. And I can't say that I haven't been spoken to, because I speak to Cheryl Bradley. We went to college together. But the thing about it is, what Ms. Assign said is something that I see a lot. Brown and black kids, and I'm also Hispanic. I'm from Panama. Brown and black kids, especially boys, are singled out and are separated a lot more than they need to be. One of the things that I've done over the years is I build relationships with kids. Unless you build those relationships, it doesn't matter if they're a single gender, whatever the school situation is, the environment has to be that they not only feel welcome there, but they know that you're going to give them everything they need to succeed every day that they're there. You know, best practices is something that all teachers need. It doesn't matter if you're just teaching boys and girls, and I know that you've done rites of passage. I've done that at my church. I'm a minister as well. Working with some boys, the Henderson boys that graduated from McCallum, those boys see something that they need, and you do have to work with boys differently than you work with girls. I know people have said differently, and we may be the same kind of people, but we do things differently, and we think differently. Just ask any man that's been married for a while. But the thing about it is, we do need to be open to change. Yes. I've been through peers where we had the blueprint, the this, the that, where the college prep. I've seen all kind of changes, but until we set the environment that says we care for you, we're going to give you the best that is out there, we're not going to make the change sustainable.
Thank you.
I'm a product of Houston-Tillotson, but at Houston-Tillotson, everybody that taught me, Dr. Marshall, Dr. Erdy, all had doctorates from University of Texas. So they were qualified, and they prepared me to come out to an environment where I could work with people of color and people that were, and poverty is not a reason to not educate kids.
Amen. Yes, ma'am, and this is our closing mic here, yes.
Hello, my name is Helen Miller. I live in the LBJ Garcia community. I've been an advocate for the kids in this community for the last 11 years. There's some things I've heard everybody speak today, but from my experience with my children in AISD, starting elementary school, these kids in my community, they were beaten down and beat up in elementary school. When my kids went to elementary school, they homeschooled in this community. I didn't move, because this is my community. The elementary school they went to at the time had the highest percentage of beginner teachers in the entire district. They were brought here on this side of town. They got here, they got culture shock. Our black males would label with behavior problems or put in special ed. The parents' culture was different. So a lot of parents don't come inside the schools because they were banned from the schools in elementary schools. They were threatened to be arrested. So they just don't come anymore. So if you don't live in the community, you don't breathe what's going on in the community, you don't see what's happening, and I see all my black males walking the street that haven't graduated, don't have a job, And it's not all about the parents' involvement. It's about the people inside the school can make the difference also, too, if they want to. They choose not to. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our time for the Q&A session is now over. If you have questions that you did not get addressed, please write them and get them submitted to the district. I'd like to thank the panel and ask if you have any closing remarks, any summary remarks you'd like to make as Ms. Bradley comes forward. Starting perhaps to my far left, Mr. Winship, and then coming around. Okay. Yes. Dr. Sines?
Yeah, there was a lot that was shared this morning, and I appreciate the urgency and the frustration of a lot of the comments. And I would say, venture to say, not speak for anybody, but a lot of us share those same frustrations. The young man who spoke earlier about facts, you know, from the mouth of kids, right? I mean, this is truly profound, his commentary, his comments. And I hope that this is an opportunity, as I said very early on, this is an opportunity for the community to come and engage and have this dialogue, which I think is a step in the positive direction. I do hope that there is another opportunity to do that. And we do have to educate ourselves about this research. You know, the gentleman said earlier, it is inconclusive, and that would be my professional opinion. It is inconclusive, and that is frustrating. That's frustrating as a researcher. That's frustrating as a parent. I'm also a parent. I mean, these are issues that we have to continue to push forth on, and our community should not be an experiment or a laboratory for some of these initiatives. Now, we've got to educate ourselves about the research, and I'll say two resources out there on either side: National Association of Single-Sex Public Education. And by the way, that's public education, because private ed models around single-sex are very, very different, parochial, et cetera, right? And then on the other side is the American Council on Co-Educational Institutions, and those are sort of the two organizations nationally made up of scholars and practitioners and parents and teachers that are sort of pushing forth a conversation about these issues. And then you have the Department of Education that's also released their own reports and data around co-ed versus single ed. And not to mention the involvement of the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, around the legality of these practices as perhaps another form of quote-unquote segregation along the lines of racial segregation. Now, whether you believe in all those points of view, ultimately you decide for yourself, but you do have to educate yourself, and I would challenge all of us to continue to do that around these issues, and certainly to keep asking the tough questions of our leadership and our administration and our community members about whether or not this is appropriate direction for our community, for our kids, and ultimately ask ourselves this question: would you put your kid, would I put my kid in this school, knowing what we know now, or certainly knowing what we need to know in the future?
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Well, knowing what I know now, my fact, as the young man eloquently expressed, is sitting right there. That's my fact. And I think that the school has been a blessing to her, and that's where I come from. If I had a choice for my other two, that would be my choice. My choice. I understand that the perception is that this is something that's being forced upon you, and I can honestly say I don't know how I would react if that was my reality. Lillian's decision to be there, that was our choice. So I respect where you're coming from, and I understand the frustration and the passion that was displayed today, and I do believe this is something that needs to continue to be discussed as we move forward.
Mr. Harris?
I concur. I think that we definitely need to keep meeting until we find a solution and hold accountable those who make those decisions for us. And that we also keep in mind that we spend more in the state of Texas to incarcerate a young man than we do on anything. So I ask again, as I've said over and over, that we look at all of the issues involved, because change is never easy. I was a product of desegregation. If you asked me then, no. If you ask me now, I graduated and opportunities were provided for me. So I would just ask that we have an open mind, that we do the research, and that we continue to ask the hard questions, and at the end of the day, be willing to make some decisions in the best interest of our future bankers, lawyers, doctors, professors, school board members, our kids.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon?
Yeah, I think I'm not a particular proponent of same-sex or same-gender schools. I do think, as I said before, however, that something needs to be done in AISD so that black and brown kids can get a decent education and be successful and achieve. I think that if we decide to go for same-sex schools, same-gender schools, we should understand why we're doing it, what we hope to achieve, and how we're going to set these schools up to achieve those particular goals. And I also agree with my representative from the University Hills Neighborhood Association, go University Hills, 2-3, that whatever we do, the historic inequity between West and East and Austin has to be addressed, and these schools, if we construct them, need to be of equal or better quality than what we're doing elsewhere in Austin.
Thank you. Ms. Gorka?
I think we had a lot of good answers to some questions, because I think you talk about class sizes and about legislative about the funding and also about tests that are imposed upon us. But you know what? We don't have a lot of time, and a lot of those things are being addressed. So I do beseech you all to do the research and come to your own conclusion with this, but we don't have a lot of time to fix things because we can't depend on the state of Texas to work on the mandated test in a rapid amount of time that we need to address the needs of our students. So just again, the time is upon us.
Thank you.
I just want to concur with what Dr. Gordon said, and so many of you all out there in the audience said today, is that no matter where your child is going to, they are entitled to the best quality educators, teachers, curriculum and instruction. And so that's one of the things that we at Webb have strived to do. And as you know, Webb was also in the brink of being shut down, and those are the things that we have done there. And I hope that that continues at other campuses, and I'm sure it will.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
And since I'm the last one, I want to remind everyone here that we are not a decision-making body. We were here to answer your questions, and I am here to answer your questions as a parent of a child in a single-gender school. So if you have any questions afterwards that you'd like to ask me privately, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you very much, panel. Let's thank our panel.
Thank you all for coming out. It was a definitely interesting discussion, not something that I completely expected. Let me say this. First of all, this has to go before the board, so it has not been decided, and nobody's shoving anything down anybody's throat. I have never allowed that to happen in District 1. That has directly come from the school district. Now, we have had things shoved down our throat that has been state mandated and has come from the state, but not from the school district, because I have fought for you all every step of the way. The second thing is, as I listen to the discussion, I'm not swayed in the least that this is not the best thing for our kids. I do believe it can be a game changer as we look at education in this community. I still believe that, and I will continue to believe that. I do not believe that if you're between the age of 10 and 14, you should have a probation officer. I don't believe if you are 18 or older, you should have a probation officer. But if you are in middle school and you have a probation officer, people, please tell me why. What do you do? If you are a parent between the ages of 10 and 14, people tell me, what do you do? We've got to change something. Something has to happen. So if you don't want this, then you tell me what it is that we do to change what is happening to children, because we have to do something. Now, we can talk about teachers all day long. Don't ever think a principal go out to look for the worst teachers in the school. They don't. They don't. The superintendents are not set out to hire the worst principal. They do not. Our faculty and staff are working with different issues than all of us have seen in our lifetime. Different issues. We're all facing things. Our children are facing things that we would not have even thought of having to face when we were growing up. Somebody said, yes, we did. Yes, you're okay. And there's a lot of things that are coming to schools, that a lot of things that our parents are facing, that some of our parents did not have to face. And we talk about poverty being an issue. Well, poverty is in the Bible. That has always been an issue. But it should not determine what our children's direction should be in life. Whether we have parental involvement in the school or not, it should not determine the education that our children receive. But you're right, I agree. Sometimes it does, and we'll sit up here and we'll talk about power. We also have to bring something else into it. A lot of it is race. Because if we look at that last report that was done with Texas A&M about the judicial system and our children going into the judicial system, it showed that in school, African-American male, the disproportionality was African-American male. It was Latino male. Now, I'm sorry, you can talk about money all you want to and finances all you want to. That's a skin color. That's race. So we have to look at how we deal with these issues. And I'm not saying that single-gender school is a panacea by no stretch of the imagination, and I brought together a panel that definitely was not here to be cheerleaders for this, because they told me up front what to expect. I brought them here so that maybe your questions could get answered and that you could see what some of the research is, what studies they have done, what they have experienced, and that was basically it. Now, do I agree that this conversation needs to continue? Yes, it does. But I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to let outside forces come into this community and decide what's best for your children, because when the dust settles, you will be left with the impact from whatever it is somebody else's decision has come forth for your child. And although we have some parents who are doing great jobs raising their children, you also know some parents who have not done one thing to raise their child. You also know there are children who are raising themselves as well as their siblings. So I'm going to say this to you. If you're raising your child well and you're doing a great job, you better believe there's going to be someone who's going to impact what you have instilled in your child. So what I'm saying to you is, let's get these kids, and I do believe we could do it better in a single-gender setting, and try to impact some of the things that they have not received, and try to give them the things that they will need to succeed. And I do believe we can develop a great model, but it will be community and district, not just the district alone. And I know someone said we could do it like the Ann Richards model. There's a lot of models out there that we can do. But the one thing that I want to see is that any child who wants that form of education should be to be able to access it. And that's it. And yes, if you didn't want to come to the school, you could opt out. But there's a lot of discussion I see that needs to be done. I have some things to go back and think about, and I do believe that maybe the discussion needs to continue. But believe me, I would never, ever hurt your child. If I cannot help your child, I will not harm your child.
Thank you for coming. There are a lot of other things we could have been done, but this was very important to the community. Community, thank you for being here. Have a blessed day.